and they did. At the same time, they bought land on Young's Mountain for a transmitter site. Young's Mountain is the highest point in Rowan County, which was another advantage. All the time that these things were going on for WRDX, WSTP was evolving from a 250 watt radio station, a general decision by the Federal Communications Commission to allow stations who were operating on 6 channels, only 250 watts to serve a local audience. They decided that those radio stations should have 1,000 watts, and we immediately applied for that and got that for the AM station. And I don't remember the exact year we did that, but it was sometime in the 70s. In the interim, we bought a higher powered transmitter. When we took over the radio station in October 1956, the FM station was operating on 3,000 watts. And we knew that there was some things going on in FM called multiplexing. As a matter of fact, the radio station 2 of us worked for in Fayetteville had been multiplexing background music over a subcarrier of the FM. Jack Eichner and I both knew about that because Eichner had played a role in the development of the phase lock loop, which permitted a station to not wander all over the big space it controlled in the FM dial, but to stay fixed at a point. Once that occurred, then subcarrier development was possible. In 1959, we bought a high-powered FM transmitter from Gates Radio, and we went to 15,000 watts of power. We used the subcarrier of that to experiment with what became stereo. We broadcast one signal on the AM station and an identical signal on the FM station, and we took 2 radios and tuned them to each station, and you got the stereo effect. And we demonstrated that, and to the best of our knowledge, that was probably one of the first occasions that stereo was generated in that manner in the country. We didn't seek credit for it, we didn't get credit for it, but there were people who knew what we had done because we did that quite often for a while. As we developed the FM, it was WSTP FM, we realized we had to create an identity for the FM station. I had run across a study done by the University of Michigan about the sounds in our alphabet. And the one thing that struck me was that there is no sound of any letter in the alphabet like the letter R. The R is never misunderstood or mistaken. Anybody who can say R doesn't have to worry about C and D and E and G and all of those words that have a sound alike. In fact, especially if you don't have an extremely clear enunciation and pronunciation of the word. Well, learning that, I decided, well, now what do we do with that? Well, we're going to apply for a call letter to separate the 2 stations, and R ought to be a part of it. And for whatever reason, I thought RDX made a lot of sense because initially that stood for WRDX Radio Dixie. And we are, if nothing else, playing country music, and we are down south. We're Dixie. So that's really how WRDX became the call letters of the radio station. Somewhat like WSTP, we serve the Piedmont, and we realized as our area began to shrink because of all the other stations going on in towns all around us, that we no longer serve the Piedmont, but we did set the pace. So WSTP ran a program, ran a contest, and a student at Catawba College came up, WSTP, we set the pace, we gave him $5, and we owned the rights to use We Set the Pace. I don't know if that's used anymore or not, I doubt it. However, call letters play a big role because you're talking about something that's left in the mind of the listener. And what we eventually did through the development of beach music, RDX became X106, and then we learned that X had no meaning. X was like the X factor. You multiple in mathematics. X was an unknown. Well, pretty soon we discovered that X106 was an unknown, so we started working on something else, and eventually came around to Beach 106. We were slow to get there, but it eventually evolved out of response to callers and those who responded to the magazine, and so we came up with two different call letters. STP was also advanced by a product that you put in your gas tank. The guy, I can't think of his name, who owned the company, he came to town one day with a bunch of red nylon jackets with STP on it, because he knew we were broadcasting races, and he wanted us to participate in a promotion. And we had a bunch of jackets with STP on them, and we gave them away at a soapbox derby on Grove Street, as I recall. I don't know how successful that promotion was, but the soapbox derby was another event that people in Salisbury participated in and enjoyed back in the 70s. Does that answer what you're looking for? You'll have to cut that off.
All right, tell me, what is, in hindsight, what are things that stick out from looking back now at both radio stations? What's...
Want to roll it?
You're rolling.
When you look back through 40 years of being in the broadcasting business, you frequently ask yourself, what would have happened had you done something other than what you did do? Because you realize that when you make one choice, you forego other opportunities and other choices. And you can beat yourself to death with that what if game, or you can simply acknowledge that what you did at the time was the right thing to do at the time, and then you have to think, what did you do with it after you started it? Beach music particularly was a challenge because over the period of time that we broadcast beach music, which was something approaching 7 years or better, we found that we had become sort of the premier beach music station in the country. There were other stations playing the music, not full time. They also didn't play full-time beach music. They would always mix it with something else, like the current hits. And we found out you couldn't mix that oil and water and expect to make the motor go. It wouldn't do that. The people didn't care for that. They would tune you out. One of the things that I think over the years that came out of that was an understanding of who these people were, who were beach music aficionados. We learned that many of them owned and operated their own small business. They were an independent bunch. When they had gone to the beach where they first ran into this music, they worked as everything from, the lifeguard was the romantic side of it, but they worked in the kitchens, they worked in the hotels making beds, they did anything they could do, especially in the summer jobs, in order to spend the summer at the beach. And they lived very frugally. But that's also where, in my view, they met the people that formed the dance. Many of these people worked in the kitchens of restaurants at the beach, and many of the chefs running those kitchens were black. And some of those folks became friends, and the black chefs invited their assistants to come over to a couple of clubs at Atlantic Beach. They couldn't dance, but they could go to the gallery and watch the folks that did dance, and they were good. Well, out of that experience is where I believe beach music was born, especially that aspect of it which lent itself to shagging. The dance was really the key. If you played music and you did not have the beat that you could shag to, you were just playing music. That's all you were doing. The shaggers were demanding of a beat, and that beat had to have a driving force, which is what the consultant from Denver recognized. He saw that it was constant, it was never let up, but it was also something which people felt good about listening to it. It was an upbeat, an up-tempo music that people enjoyed. He saw that, and frankly, I saw that. I remember a song that John Hook had a copy of called Hot Chocolate. And I can't remember the name of the song right now.
It started with a kiss.
Thank you. It started with a kiss by Hot Chocolate. That song was not designed or recorded to be a shag tune. But John knew enough about what the equipment had, so he increased the tempo. Instead of it playing at 33 RPM, John goosed it up to about 37, 38, which gave it the drive. And I never knew that was the case because John hadn't said anything about it. He was just playing the song. And the way he kept people from recording it is he would always drop some comment in the middle of the song. And everybody would have fits trying to cut out the call letters or something that he said so they could have the song. And one day a fellow showed up from Johnson City, Tennessee, that had bought a copy of that song, and he paid a lot of money for it. And he was angry because he didn't understand that the song that he bought was the original, and the song that we were playing was doctored, speeded up, so you could shag to it. Well, Hook and Phil Kerr finally settled him down, and he agreed that what we had done was good for the song because it made it danceable. But he was unhappy that he was out $100 and he still didn't have the beat that he could play. We did things like that, but that was called broadcasting back in those days, and I thought it was sort of fun.
Tell me about April McIntyre.
April McIntyre, striking, stunning young woman, the daughter of Russell McIntyre. When I bought the radio station with my partners in 1956, Russell McIntyre was the manager of WSTP. And I wanted to keep that man on the staff. And so I convinced my two partners that we should not reduce his pay, only his job. We talked to McIntyre and convinced him that what we thought he could do for us at the same pay as he was getting as manager is to become our community relations person. Also, in the meantime, we wanted him to become a reporter. Remember what I said about what it takes to become a reporter? I knew if I could do it, he could do it because he had been a lifelong part of Salisbury. Russell McIntyre had an interesting background, and I'm getting around to who April is because I have to tell you who her father was. Her father was a vocalist. He played with he sang with Paul Whiteman and Claude Thornhill, and he was competent to the job. However, I always thought Russell made one mistake. Russ was a kind and gentle person, but he really thought there ought to be a second Bing Crosby, and that he was the second Bing Crosby. And I'm sorry,